Well, Mike, officially we are live. We're just going to wait for some people to join. So we'll leave it a minute or so. If you're listening on the podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes, then this is Anger Management with Mike Fisher. So yeah, we're just on the live. If you want to come and see this video and you're listening to the podcast, it's available on Facebook and YouTube. And we normally go out live every other Monday at the moment 8 p.m, but we're winding it back to 7 p.m. in a few weeks' time, just so I can get to bed a bit earlier, Mike. I can't stay out late these days, especially with a little one, a little 7-month-old. I think he was up at 5 o'clock this morning. So yeah, late nights don't exist for me. So I've asked Chris to dial back. Anyway, let's do it. We're a minute into the show, so hopefully we got some people joining us now. So let's go for it. I'm here. I am joined today with Mike Fisher. Mike is the founder of the British Association of Anger Management. He has over 26 years experience in the field of personal and professional development. Mike has become known as one of the leading experts in the field of anger management in the UK. He's a publisher of 2 books, Beating Anger and Mindfulness, The Art of Managing Anger. Now, Mike, I've summarized your whole life there in one paragraph. Do you kind of want to fill in the gaps on the rest of it there, please?
Well, actually, it's not 26 years, it's 32 years.
Wow, okay. Well,
working in the field of...
Out of date.
Yes, but it usually is. In fact, I mean, it's always better just to say, 2 decades, 3 decades, because then at least it kind of gives you the flexibility. But I've been involved in personal development and professional development for 32 years. I'm a trained counselor and group facilitator, and in the last 23 years, I've been delivering anger management programs. And in the last 22 years, that's pretty much all I've been doing. However, of course, I do a huge amount of counseling, because when people come to my anger management programs or they one-to-one work with me, there's always a counseling component to it. But essentially, it's psychoeducational. I'm passionate about the subject. I can talk about it forever, and I live it on a day-by-day, moment-to-moment basis.
And what are some of the highlights of your career so far, anyway?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Look, you know what? The ultimate highlight is when you get the most skeptical, resistant, cynical bloke or woman, and you can see it because of body language, the way they communicate, the tone in their voice. And then you see, by the time you get to maybe the 3rd or 4th group session, or in my one-to-one work, maybe the 6th session, because what happens, of course, is that as they start to embody and embrace what they learn, they notice their lives are changing. So you see color come back to their face, you hear a sparkle in you see a sparkle in their eyes, and you hear a different tone in their voice. And for me, that there's nothing more exciting than seeing people really starting to not necessarily get it, but to find that if they apply what they learn, it can be profoundly transformative. And I tend to get quite embarrassed when I have people that I've trained up who co-facilitate with me, and we've trained 210 people, who are like so evangelical, it's kind of almost embarrassing. But, if it's touched their lives in the way that it has, well, that's what it is. So those are, that's one of the major highlights. But also, 3 years ago, we won this award 3 years running for one of the most popular organizations in the field of personal and professional development, through an international magazine who has nearly 200,000 readers. And so we won it 3 years running, and getting that kind of acknowledgement, on an international platform is, well, it's great. It's fantastic. I can't complain with it, especially 3 years running. And then, of course, the final component to a highlight is being able to publish a book and get it into the bestseller of the Sunday Times, or to receive some big fat royalty check because we sold like 20,000 copies. So those are real highlights. But you know what? You probably know this is if you love what you do, you never have to work another day in your life.
Yes, I've heard the saying. Definitely.
So I'd say that every single day that I do what I'm doing is a highlight. However, having said all of that, this pandemic has really taken it out of me because I have never been so busy, and we've never had so many bookings. So on one level, it's a huge advantage to all of us, but actually, from a business point of view, I've been working my ass off.
I want to cover that a bit more later on in the show. I just want to welcome everyone along to this, and thanks for joining us so far. If you're listening back to this on the podcast, hello. If you're here with us live, don't forget you can actually ask your questions live. If you've got any anger management issues, or people that got anger management issues, your children, parents, grandparents, anyone like that, please come in, ask your questions, and we'll try and get them answered for you. Now, we were talking just before we came on here, actually, about how that you got into doing what you do, and you told us an interesting story about your grandfather, I believe it was. Just wondering if you could highlight us on that, please.
Mm-hmm. So you like that little anecdote, huh?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So how that came up is when I recognized that I have this thing called the angry gene, and you can identify the angry gene by just sending some spit off to one of the labs, and they'll tell you whether you have it or don't have it. But my grandfather, who happened to be a welterweight champion in 1909 in the UK, and I think it was the world welterweight champion. My uncle described him as an extremely angry man. Now, in the whole of boxing history, there have only been 2 Jewish boxers. I've researched it. There's a book on one of the Jewish boxers, and my grandfather was the second one who had a lot of publicity. And so, according to my uncle, he was this extraordinary angry man, and my relationship with my grandfather was pretty tragic, simply because he was just one angry mother F. And of course, how this all worked out is that my grandmother, she compensated for him. So I was very close to my grandmother, but not close to my grandfather at all. And I come from a very large family who was very extended. But also what I said to you, that my younger sister, who has the gene, my younger sister is a rageaholic. And I think that was entirely due to me terrorizing her when I was a child, when she was a young child. And then my brother, who is 10 years older than me, he also had the angry gene. However, he had 4 heart attacks when the doctor told him, if you have another one of those angry outbursts, you could end up having another heart attack. And actually, he died 2 years ago of a heart attack. Now, I don't quite know whether it was from anger or not, but he was pretty angry himself. I mean, he wasn't even angry. My brother was just simply blatantly aggressive and abusive. And then I have a couple of cousins who also have the gene, but they're far more contained than I think I am, and my siblings are aware. And that's the story.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I mean, I kind of see, as I said to you earlier on, some similarities with me. And I wanted to sort of talk along those lines and go back to, the genetics of being angry. And is it something that is genetic? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Or is it a combination of both? Can we be born angry? Can we become angry? And what are those triggers common triggers that can make it happen for us?
So, look, the truth is that there are so many people that I've worked with who suggested that they were born angry. That's the way they describe themselves. And of course, when they investigated that with their parental figures or primary carers, often the response was, yes, since you were a very young baby, you were angry and you were really difficult. So, I don't really want to go into the details because it's a very complex subject, but when we start talking about birth trauma, people that are born angry, it could be that their first experience of anger was in the womb. There is this book called Birth Trauma by Wilhelm Reich, if those of you are interested. Reading it, it's the second most difficult book I've tried to read, simply because Wilhelm Reich was a complete and utter genius.
Right.
And, he went into a lot of detail on the subject, but as far as I'm concerned, from a theoretical perspective and academic perspective, it really did go over my head. So I don't even waste my time. In fact, I could probably read it today. So yes, I think there are people that are born angry because of birth trauma. But I just want to be very clear that this is not areas of my expertise, so I'm slightly out of my remit.
Okay.
But I want to best if I can answer the question. I imagine some of your listeners and viewers probably recognize that as well in their children themselves. But the conversation is it a mixture of nature, nurture? Is it nature? Is it nurture? And as my response to you, as you know, was to suggest that all behavior is learned. So we learn anger, whether the anger is passive aggressive or what we call active aggressive. We learn it and we get comfortable with it and we get results from it. Then, of course, there are families where you learn anger, but when you start to express it, you get it beaten out of you. Yeah. So I do think there's a combination of nature and nurture. However, I still feel quite strongly that it's more nurture than nature.
So it's a lot more to do with the way we've been brought up, what we've seen our parents do. I mean, I find it interesting though. I've got 4 kids. One of them's only 7 months old, so we won't bring him into it yet. But I see the difference in them. They all have that angry streak, which I think I have. I've managed to control it over the years. I've definitely seen it in my dad and some of my other my uncles. I've seen that angry streak, and I had it. I mean, it's still there. It never goes away. I just control it. But I certainly see it in my kids. Certainly in a few of them, especially when they're tired. They can just bang, they go, and they'll. I don't know whether that's just a thing with all kids. I mean, hopefully other people on here listening will probably agree and hear that all the time. But it's hard to know. We try, me and my wife, we try not to show anger or any extreme emotions in front of them. So, I definitely feel there's something genetics there with them.
Did you want me to respond to that?
Yeah. I mean, if you want, I can go on to the next one. I was making a statement, but if you want to come in on it.
I mean, there's something. I think there's something interesting that you said, because my view is that children are very naturally and very organically angry because they're so spontaneous. The problem is that if, as a parent, you're not comfortable with anger, what happens is that we immediately shut them down, and then they learn, actually, it's not okay to be angry. And then what they do is they suck it in and they act it out somewhere else. So, the parents who might be listening, I think it's very important that you create the space for your kid to be angry. But what is important when a child is angry is to ask them, what do they need? Simply that question. I can see you're angry. I get that you're angry. What do you need right now? They might not be able to articulate that, but you could then start to impart a vocabulary, an emotional vocab they can begin to apply. And Mark, I think it's important that, the listeners really take what it is that I'm saying seriously, because if you can at a very young age model healthy anger, which we'll come to, yeah, and you can really encourage children to express their anger. But I'm not talking about screaming and shouting and hurling abuse or breaking things. I'm just talking about giving the space, just do whatever they need to do in order to vent. So it becomes a cathartic experience. But at the same time, you can also ask them, okay, I get that you're angry, but what do you need right now? And so that's what's important, is give them a vocab, which might be, do you need me to listen to you? Do you need me to give you a cuddle? Do you need me to give you attention? Do you need me to do something very specific for you? Do you need me to understand you? Do you need me to play with you? Do you need me to do whatever it is that you want me to do? You tell me if you can articulate that. And that if I can do that for you, I'm going to do that for you. And it's a fantastic, fantastic place to start emotionally building a vocab for your children from a very, very age. And it is transformative. And I want to tell you why it's transformative. I have a son who's 29 years old. He was born with a hole in his heart, didn't get enough blood in his brain, so he has severe learning difficulties. What do we teach him? The first thing we taught him is to be clear about his yes and his no. That's where we started. Because by yes and no, it helped him to create boundaries in order to feel safe. The second thing we taught him is that if he wants to vent, act out his anger, he has a tennis racket, he has a cushion, a crazy kid. Then, of course, yeah, that's what we did. And then, of course, what we also did is to see if we could get him to articulate what he needed. And slowly but surely, he was able to be very clear about his no. That was the boundary he set. We respected that. Yes was the boundary he set. We also respected that. And, things like Ollie, his name's Oliver. Ollie, do you need me to listen to you? Ollie, do you need to give you attention? Ollie, do you need me to hold you? And, not a large vocab because he has special needs. Yeah. But at least a language so he could articulate it. And what is so beautiful about this, Mark, is that, he could say, Daddy, give me attention.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, simple as that. Or I would say, Ollie, I can't give you attention now. Give me 5 minutes and I'll give you all the attention you need. Or, Daddy, I'm hungry. Can you feed me? Or, Daddy, I need you to listen to me. Daddy, I want you to read to me. So from a very young age, Oliver was able to articulate his needs. But that doesn't mean that he didn't get angry, because I think, one of the things that he realized is just how limited he was and how unbelievably frustrating that has been for him his whole life.
I find that really interesting, actually, and it rings a lot of sense with me, and hopefully it will do with some of our listeners today. That actually children, we're building them up to be adults, and they have a vocabulary, and maybe we don't give them enough of vocabulary to be able to express their emotion, because emotion, it's a very hard thing to know what that feeling is. As adults, hopefully we know a bit more, but as children, I mean, I often get, you're making me angry. And I say, no, I can't make you angry. Angry is a feeling. And then they go off. It's not a thing to say to a child. Then they go off. No, things you're saying make me angry. And I guess that's me just, I suppose as parents as well, we get frustrated and, they're prodding and poking us all day. And especially, when they haven't had enough sleep and you just get that constant grind all day. And then it explodes, doesn't it? We both get angry. And we both aren't able to express our emotions properly. So I really think that's, something have we got some, I mean, you've explained some techniques there. I mean, is there any specific techniques on top of that we can use for our children, on top of the vocabulary, to help calm down an angry child, especially when they're tired, when the vocabulary is not working? Is there any specific techniques we can use?
Well, just hold on a second. Let's go back a few steps, Marcus. I want to correct you on something that you said, because I think it's a myth. But let me just clear that up for a moment. Look, what you were saying about, kids might not be able to express their feelings in the same way that some adults do. Well, I think kids are much better at expressing their feelings. They just don't have a narrative for it. They don't have the language for it. Whereas, as you can imagine, my client group are articulate, successful, bright, intelligent. But when I do a presentation called Feeling Wheel, this is the first time they really are learning about feelings, where they've never learned about feelings before. And I mean, if I can just expand it in detail. So, when we run a program, the first thing that we do is we say to them, we're going to check in. I need to know what your name is. I need to know how you feel. And I need you to share key learnings. So the first night, they don't know what they feel. Second night, what I mean by that, the following week, they still don't know what they feel. Yeah. By the third week of presentation, when I say they don't know what they feel, what I mean by that is they say things like, all right, fine, good, okay, or I think I'm okay, or I'm tired, or I'm hungry. Those are not feelings. And the point I want to make here is because while they were growing up, they didn't get the education. They didn't get it in school, and they didn't get it at home. A lot of the clients that I work with, or participants I work with, they learned at a very young age it was too dangerous to express feeling and show feeling. And the reason for that is because their parents were so inept. That is common today. I start a new program on Wednesday night, I can tell you, with 15 people, and I can tell you they'll be doing the same thing. Fine, okay, all right. Hungry, tired, couldn't be better. Yeah.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. So
can I ask just quickly, sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah,
is that something that's a British thing, or is it?
No, it's an international thing.
Right, okay.
Worked in America, I've worked in Germany, I've worked in South Africa, I've worked in Israel, and of course I've worked in the UK. But it's a international. I mean, the Spanish talk over their feelings. Have you ever heard a Spanish person talk? They talk at a million miles an hour. They talk over the feelings, so they don't have to feel anything.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, no, I say that because I know, we're always, stiff upper lip and we don't talk about our emotions. So I wonder if it was just confined to us, but it's interesting to hear it's a global phenomenon. And
absolutely.
Obviously,
it's hard.
It's going back into me saying it's all about education, and as parents that are listening on here, it shows how important our job is to be able to make help our children find those emotions, be able to articulate it properly. Yes.
So you talk about tips. So maybe one of the things that we can do, and I have a couple at the moment. They've got a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old, and part of their responsibilities every single day to each other as the couple is first thing in the morning, they don't ask, how are you? They ask, how do you feel? Now, I've given them a little feeling wheel to identify what their feelings are. They're now doing that with their kids because their kids never learned this at school. And of course, they haven't learned it at school. I mean, look, the education system is changing, but it takes a long time for this dinosaur to change. But it's happening, but it's happening too slowly. So the challenge, with the parents listening here, instead of ask your child, how are you? Ask your child, how are you feeling? And then what you can do is you can slowly begin to correct them. So, people have said, well, how many feelings are there? Because, Mark, the reality is there's feelings and emotions. And there's a distinction and a difference between the two. There are actually 8 feelings that we're born with. There are 8 feelings that we're born with. Angry, sad, scared, and happy. That's it. Those are the feelings you're born with. Now, how do I know this? Because I read a book 30 years ago called The Secret Life of an Unborn Child, written by a doctor who did 7 years of research into the subject. We're born with 4 feelings. That's it. According to the American theorists, they're doing the same thing. Now, somebody who was really OCD and a bit pedantic identified there's 141 emotions. There's much more than that in the English language. But, if you take, for example, anger, and then you attach aggression to it, That's no longer a feeling. That's an emotion. An emotion is the outward expression of the feeling.
Right. Okay.
So this is a tip for parents, is to get as close as they possibly can to the feeling and educate and ask the kid how they're feeling. And if the child doesn't know, you can just give them the 4 feelings. Are you feeling angry, scared, sad, or happy? And that's where you start. And then this is really the beginning of the emotional alphabet, simply introducing them to those feelings. Now, we actually have 8 feelings, according to BAM, the British Association of Anger Management. We have angry, scared, happy, ashamed, hurt, peaceful, powerful, and there's one more that I've forgotten. Happy, sad, and it's sad. So
I thought you were going to go through the dwarfs then.
No. But did you want me to come back to some of the other tips?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really interesting what you're talking about, emotions and feelings, actually, because I guess if you can attack the feelings, if there's 8 feelings, then actually what you're doing by working on the anger feeling, then actually you can solve a whole range of emotions rather than trying to work with the emotions, with the aggressiveness. You actually go back a little bit more, and I guess you can then fix many things with one line of therapy, I suppose.
Well, look, I mean, that's a very interesting point that you're making, because if you this material that I teach is so rich, as you know, and I'm hoping the listeners are enjoying this. But from my perspective, if you can communicate your feelings comfortably, and what I mean by that is that if you're aware of what your feelings are and you're comfortable expressing those feelings, what you'll often find underneath anger, so anger might be what's present, but underneath anger, and it's irrelevant who it is, Mark, underneath the anger, you usually have hurt. Underneath the hurt, you would usually have fear. And sometimes alongside the fear is you'll have shame or sadness. But what's being presented is anger. So,
right, yeah.
Based on my experience, when somebody's angry with me, and believe you me, I get people, by the very nature I do, they get really angry with me. Why? Because they feel safe enough to be angry with me, if that makes sense. And so I know that when somebody's barking at me, I know what's going on underneath that. I know that they feel hurt. I know that they feel scared. And I know that they might be feeling sadness or shame. But if we go deeper than that, I know that in that moment they feel powerless, helpless, and hopeless. Now think about parents. When a parent is trying to get a child to cooperate or contribute, and the child doesn't want to do that, forget it. It ain't going to happen. Yeah. So what happens is their anger temperature increases. I mean, this as a parent. So as you're trying to get a child to contribute or to cooperate, and they don't want to, what it actually triggers is powerlessness, hopelessness, and helplessness, besides the feelings I've just mentioned. And underneath that is a trigger that it directly stimulates what I define as our unmet needs. So if you think about, I'm angry with you because you're not cooperating, but actually that's symptomatic of the dynamic in our relationship. What's really happening is that I'm angry with you because I don't experience you valuing me, respecting me, appreciating me, listening to me. Do you get that distinction?
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
So if you break down the situation, any angry situation, what you'll often find is that we are triggered not by their behavior, but we are triggered by the fact that they're not going to cooperate, which means they're not going to meet our needs, which is directly linked to feeling valued, appreciated, understood, respected, cared for, etc., etc., etc. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and I want to go back to in a minute. Some maybe tips for anger management. I just want to recap of, and we've got a question coming in here that we can look at. So you are here on the Dad of Soul Deep Dive. We are funded by Worthing Community Chess, and we are here with Mike Fisher, and we're talking about anger management. So we've had a question pop up here saying, really want to listen. But having the first peaceful bedtime for little one in age. Well done. That's always a challenge, especially in this household. God knows how many times they come up and down the stairs. I've already had 2 or 3 come down already. Like to chip in about trying to remain calm in the face of childhood anger, which is usually a case of not being able to articulate bad feelings or lack of control. And I think that just goes back to what we were saying. It's about not being able to articulate those feelings, and I suppose it's up to us as parents to try and educate our children with those feelings, but I suppose we have to educate ourselves first. I just want to go back then to what we were talking about before, and I guess some of the tips we've covered already for trying to manage anger in our children, and it's about education. But what about those times when it just explodes? How can we try and bring someone back from the brink?
Okay, well, who are we talking about? Are we talking about the kids exploding or the parents exploding?
I mean, I suppose in this instance, let's have a look around the kids. But I mean, I guess there's a crossover here between two, is there?
Well, look. Well, first of all, I like the question, so thank you. That question doesn't often get asked. But let me go back a few steps here,
Okay.
just to give you some background to my skill set. I delivered anger management programs to Ealing Council, to the NHS Family Children's Services. I think they're literally defunct. When the Conservatives took over, obviously cut budgets, and I ran these programs every second month for 16 years, made a lot of money out of it. Thank you very much, taxpayer. However, what was profoundly powerful about those programs is because parents had absolutely no idea how to manage children's anger. And so in order to manage children's anger, you need to learn how to manage your own anger. So the title of the program is called Understanding Anger for Parents. Now, it was continuously oversubscribed, to say the least. It was hugely popular, okay? So the whole of Ealing, most of the parents in the whole of Ealing for 16 years got a free anger management program through the local council. I learned a lot about understanding anger for parents. And the starting point is that if a parent can manage the anger and model that for children, that's a real gift and a blessing to the child. So I'm not suggesting that the parents would act their anger out. They would simply say to their child, I feel angry with you, and I need you to listen to me. I need you to cooperate. I need to understand how difficult it is for me right now. Yeah? So you're literally communicating a feeling, and you're also communicating a need, because what we focus on, once again, is the symptoms. That's what we focus on. Yeah. Coming back to answering your question, children, teenagers, young adults are naturally emotionally regressed. By the very nature of a child being a child, they are regressed. As adults, we're not regressed. As adults, our role and responsibility is to behave like mature adults, which is not to act our anger out, but of course to express it in healthy, respectful, mature ways. Now, when a child is acting their anger out and they are throwing a tantrum, create the space for them to throw the tantrum. Just create it, because it's only a matter of time when they will stop throwing the tantrum. Just let them, because throwing tantrums is absolutely exhausting as a parent, or a kid. Yeah, eventually they get just absolutely exhausted. So it's about creating the space for them to do that. But I've also had people saying, but what about in supermarkets? Or what about at the airport? Or what about at the bus station or the underground? Just let them throw the tantrum. Just let them go crazy. as crazy as they want to go. But at the same time, they've also got to be safe. So you've got to make sure that they're safe. That's the one thing. The second thing is with parents, when they regress, they go from being, the example I want to give, I'm 63 years old. When I regress, I go to being a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. Now, children are not naturally traumatized. We traumatize children, through our ignorance and lack of understanding of the human psyche and human psychology and the human condition. If I was traumatized, I go on to traumatizing my kids. Yeah, that's what we do. I mean, it's very organic. It's very natural. It's just what happened. Even though I want to be the best parent I can be, something happens. So a lot of my anger comes from my own traumatic history. Remember, I was talking about my grandfather. My grandfather was a monster. Not only did he traumatize the children, I mean, there were a lot of us. There were 10 of us from 2 families. But he also shamed us and humiliated us. Wow. And that's very, very traumatic. Yeah. And so as parents, we have to recognize when we regress, because when we regress, we end up regretting it.
Yes.
We end up realizing that we crossed the line. And when we regress, there's nothing more traumatic for a child, because when we regress, we forget what we say. We don't consider the consequences. Usually, our anger is disproportionate to the situation or the event. And of course, think about what goes on in your body. Now, one of the reasons why we regress is because of our own history of trauma. And as the parents in this session know, there's nothing easier for a child to trigger our anger. Those parents who are skilled in managing their anger, good luck to you. I've got a lot of respect for you, because you might have had a childhood where you were loved unconditionally and you probably had healthy self-esteem. Most of the people I work with have zero self-esteem, and they have a lot of trauma, unfinished business from their past. We then pass it on to our children because it was passed on to us. Is this making sense?
Yeah. So it's like an ever. I can sort of see that educational thing. If we can't understand, how the hell are we supposed to pass that on to our children? And we're so I don't know. We can't understand our own emotions, can we? It seems like it's a massive problem worldwide. So I totally get where you're coming from. In order to be able to help our children, we've got to be able to understand ourselves better and educate ourselves.
Correct. And I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to be on this program was because, this is a plug for you guys, because I think there's something quite amazing teaching fathers how to play.
Yes.
With their kids. It just, for me, it's so trippy. And by the way, I can't tell you the amount of fathers I've told about your charity.
Brilliant. Yeah? Excellent. Thank you.
Because the thing is that fathers and mothers forget what it was like to be a child. That's part of the problem. So they forget how children experience the world. And by hanging out and playing with the child, it gives them that opportunity to access the inner child, their own playful child that's kind of, waiting to come out. So I imagine that your fathers must have so much fun. They might have resistance before, but eventually they just have the best time is what I imagine. And so what am I mentioning? I'm mentioning that because so many of us adults, we're so wounded. We've experienced so many traumatic instances that we're so emotionally shut down. And the only time we ever come alive is when our anger gets triggered. So we repress all our feelings. And the only feeling that we can't repress, Mark, is anger, because anger is a rogue feeling. It has a life of its own. Thank God for that. Because where there is anger, there is hope.
Yes.
And where there is depression, there is no hope. Because with depression, what do? We take medication to numb us even more, dumb us down even more. Eventually, when you come out of your depression and you come off the medication, you go with your anger.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be able to feel sometimes, and we've just a few weeks ago had a death in the family of a close family member, and for a little while I had a little bit of experience of what it feels like to feel like that, and that kind of numb feeling for a while. I think we need to be able to experience emotions, and some of the things you've been saying have really hit home for me with one of my kids. He can really fly off the handle, and we always try and repress him. Be quiet, don't do that, rather than let them just be what they are. And I certainly think we'll be doing some more of those techniques ourselves. I just want to say, I'm going to answer Matt. Matt is one of our Dad of Soul leads here. If anyone's listened to the Dad of Soul radio show, they'll know him. We've got about 20 minutes left with one of the leading experts in the field of anger management. So if you have any comments or questions, please get them up there now. If you're listening back to this on the podcast, you can't ask any questions now, so I'm sorry. But come along to the live streams. Yeah. Also, guys, actually, can I ask you a favor? If you're listening out there and I know you're enjoying it, can you please hit the share button? More people will be able to see what's going on. So, Matt, vicious cycle to get trapped in. We must acknowledge our own life experiences and how they've affected us. So, yeah, I mean, if we can't acknowledge our past trauma, then how are we supposed to deal with that in our children? It just goes back to that education, doesn't it?
Well, Mark, I can't tell the amount of times I introduce what is called historical anger to the client group that I work with. And by the way, you also got to understand, I've worked with well over 30,000 people over the last 20 years. And when it comes to talking about regressive anger, which is directly linked to historical trauma, I say to people, who here has had a near-death experience? Right. No one's hand goes up. And then I say, have any of you been in a situation where you could have died for whatever reason, whether it's an accident or drowning or an operation that went terribly, whatever it is, yeah, being assaulted, etc. Only then hands go up. So a lot of the clients I work with suffer from post-traumatic stress. That's why they're so reactionary in the way that they are. Now, that's directly into post-traumatic stress, near-death experiences. But I mean, who hasn't had a traumatic experience? Yeah. Now, what's really weird about the programs that I deliver on, people don't take traumatic experiences seriously. That was then, this is now. What's it got to do with being alive and mature adult today? Well, the issue is that every time historic anger gets re-triggered, we literally slide down the rabbit hole. So coming back to a question that you were asking, usually you'll find that parents will suck it in, and then eventually they'll switch to the reptilian brain, and the first words that come out of their mouth is, right, that's it, get to bed, behave yourself, pull yourself together. Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is not uncommon. And that's when we switch to the reptilian brain. That's the point where we simply cannot take it anymore. We could also describe that as a regressive component. And it might be directly linked to unfinished business in our past that's never been integrated, or it's just simply we've had enough. We've run out of patience. And so it's important for parents to recognize that when they're saying, right, that's enough, that is the point where they have become dangerous. Now, I'm not talking about assaulting the kid, but they end up screaming and shouting, which for most parents, it's not very effective. It's not effective at all.
In that situation, though, and the difficulty is, we're caring for our kids. We can't just get, I guess the best thing to do in any situation where emotions are going to flare is to get yourself out of that situation. Now, in some cases, maybe you can go into another room, but you can't just leave the house. Should we try and acknowledge what's happening, or should we take ourselves out of that situation?
Look, when I trained in family therapy, the And the training, one of the trainings I had was based on the work of Alfred Adler, who basically called his therapy the psychology of encouragement, how we encourage kids because kids are so disencouraged. Some of his techniques is that if the kid is throwing a tantrum, guess what? You just go and lock yourself in the toilet, put on the music, and when the tantrum's over, come out the toilet and they're ready to move on. Now, that, in my view, that model is very dated.
Okay.
There's a chap by the name of Ches Bechul. Ches Bechul. He wrote a book called he's written a book called Your Competent Child. It's beautifully titled because what he's suggesting is our children are competent, parents are incompetent. I mean, being a parent, you don't actually have to get a degree or a certificate or a diploma. The only time you need some kind of formal training is when you act out towards your children and social services and the police involved. That's when you've got to do certain training. And by the way, the quality of the training is very poor. A lot of those parents also have to come to anger management. But there's something that you said which I think is significant. When a child is throwing a tantrum or screaming, shouting, because we live on such a small island with so many people, we become very conscious of the people around us.
Definitely.
Now, I have family in Israel. Yeah, I have a huge family in Israel. When the kid is throwing a tantrum in a country the size of Kruger less than the size of Kruger National Park in South Africa, they just let the child throw the tantrum. And when the tantrum is over, the tantrum is over. It's a loud, it's a noisy culture. People are screaming and shouting and raising their voices all the time. I see the same thing happening in Spain. However, one of the things that I'm blown away by the Spanish, they've got this unbelievable love for children. They have the most incredible patience, which it literally blows me away how patient they are with kids, how tactile they are, how caring, and how loving and supportive and kind. I mean, it just does blow me away. And obviously, let's take that back. Not obviously. A friend of mine who's a chef said to me, people who eat together remain together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
very interesting quote.
Yeah. And something you said that actually really rung true with me. 5 years ago, we were living on a farm and surrounded by fields. And we had one neighbor, an older guy, got on really well with him. And whenever the kids had a tantrum or anything like that, we didn't really care so much. We just let them go on. And to be honest, you could be further away in the house. It was an old cottage with thick walls, so you could just close the door. And actually, you knew none of the neighbors would hear. When we moved to where we are now, we're in a village and there's a lot more neighbors around us. I actually start to go, God, what the neighbor's going to think about this? It's terrible, this screaming. And then that stresses me out. And I just want to, quieten them down. So rather than let it happen, I'm worried about what other people think. And that's not doing my children any good, is it? I need to let it happen.
And of course, then what happens? They do exactly what you've done. Remember what I said earlier on, all behaviors learned. The way that we parent is the way that our parents parent. However, keep in mind, there are a lot of parents who say, I never want to be like my parent.
Yes.
And I don't want to parent the way my parent. They arrive in our anger management programs, Mark, and they say, I'm becoming just like my parents.
Yeah.
Because of the way that they bring the kids up. I do want to say one thing. I don't know how much time we've got, but I wanted to add something to this conversation. Yeah. Cool. I mean, do you do a question answer thing, or do we just talk all the way to the end?
No, we can just talk. I mean, people can pop up, with questions as we go along. So,
okay.
I'm quite happy to carry on talking around the subjects. So hopefully everyone else is here. Hopefully we're asking the right questions and covering the right subjects here. If you do want to get your questions in, guys, we've got 10 minutes left. This is a Dad to Soul Deep Dive with Mike Fisher. He's one of the leading experts in anger management. Mike, over to you.
Cool. So the point that I want to make is, in my training in the field of family therapy, one of the things that I was taught that kids want attention. It's irrelevant whether it's positive attention or negative attention, they want attention. I've completely changed my view on that because I'm very aligned to the work of School, who I mentioned earlier on, Your Competent Child. And he says kids don't want attention, they want connection. Now, when those kids that you guys work with and those fathers, what are the kids getting? They're getting 100% attention and they're getting 100% connection.
Yeah.
What an amazing ingredient. And so simple.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know who came up with this idea, but it's so simple.
Yeah, I can't take credit for it. It's Dan Flanagan who came up with it. He's the founder of Dad the Soul, and we've got a wonderful team around us now that are making this happen. It's been very difficult during lockdown to do what we do. We've been trying to deliver digital sessions. In fact, I'll give a little plug for anyone that's listening to share around this Father's Day. We've got an international Father's Day, so we've hooked up with Daddy Saturday and Fathers Incorporated over in the USA. So on the 21st, on Father's Day, at 4 p.m. UK time, we will be doing our first international meetup. And they're great. You know, it's a good way for people to get together, but you can't beat getting people in a room together. It just works. And it's that single-mindedness, that playing with your child and not worrying about what other people think that are around you. Because that's the thing as a dad, you know, and we're talking about being conscious, as any parent, really. You know, you take them to soft play and you're kind of conscious what other people think, and then you default, don't you, to being on your phone and you're not playing with the kid and the kid's running around. So, you know, we don't ban phones in our sessions, but we certainly, if we see someone, you kind of joke, you know, come on guys, no phones in here. It's time to play with the kids, and they get so much out of it, and you know, the dads and the kids. I think it's just so important.
Absolutely. So from my point of view, it's all about connection. And as you already know, I mean, I have the most amazing abilities to distract myself from what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing all day, every day. You know, it's interesting. I've been on the screen all day, then I'm on my mobile phone all day, and then I go home and I'm on my I'm on my TV all night, and then I'm on my iPad when I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm wide awake. You know, we become typical screeners, and we found this amazing way to distract ourselves. And so it is even more difficult for us as parents to connect. And when we disconnect, children know that we've disconnected. It's the same with our wives. When you give your wife a hug, make sure that you're present to the hug, because she'll know when you're not present to the hug. So there's something to be said about connection and being present and being mindful of learning to live in the here and now. You'll get so much more pleasure out of life.
One person, which definitely be on you there, Matt, who popped up earlier on. If he's still there, he's a big hugger. Here we go. He's come up. Yeah, we're all big kids playing at being grown-ups, really. Yeah, I think we are. You know, and I say, Matt, just mentioning you there, because he is, during normal times, he is our hugger. You know, I get that thing about having that real connection with it and being present. You know, I've done it before. You've been on your phone, you come in the house, and you're talking, the kids are telling you, going, yeah. You know, I'm now trying to I'm making that fire break between when I leave work and I finish. And it's difficult for me because during my normal job I'm mobile, but I'm making sure I've got everything done at my last job, and I drive back and I listen to a podcast or I listen to something that is not work. So when I walk in the door, I can be present with the children. Just popping up here, I need to tackle my anger issues. What's the best way to find classes, etc.? And what kind of options are there? So yeah, especially during the lockdown, I suppose this is quite hard. How would someone start on that road to getting help now?
So look, we've been delivering motor classes. I don't know where they came from. We've been delivering online classes on Zoom for the last 2 years with an extraordinary amount of success. We get the same results on Zoom as we do on our weekend intensives and our 10-week program we used to deliver in London. The advantage of Zoom is you can do it from the comfort of your own home. And also, we used to charge for our 10-week program in central London, we used to charge $645 Now that we do it on Zoom, we have the overhead of rent. So we charge $4.95. It's an 8-week program. It's on a Wednesday night. In fact, we've got one coming up on the 17th. And there's still, I think there's still 3 places for people to join. 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, £495, and just, come there and you'll have your heads blown. I offer one-to-one work as well. So people who want to do one-to-one work with me, it's a hell of a lot more expensive. So I tend to drive people to group work. When the lockdown is complete, we will probably go back to running our weekend intensives in Bristol, Manchester, London, and East Grinstead. Our headquarters is in Grinstead. That's why we run them there. But there are a load of programs across the country. But as you were saying earlier on, Mark, I've got 2 books in my name. I've been in the business for 32 years. I'm the leading thought leader in the field of anger management in Europe. There are a couple of Americans I've got a lot of respect for. So I'm up there with the best of them. And of course, I've got a huge amount of experience based on being in this business for as long as I have. So whoever's asked a question, our website is www.angermanage.co.uk.
There it is,
we go.
up on screen.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. I just want to.
Anything else?
Thanks for that. Yeah, we got. We're down to the last sort of 4 or 5 minutes of the show. We've talked about the negative sides of anger, but briefly before the show, I talked about using that in a positive way. And from my own experience, I've managed to channel that anger. And I sometimes felt I let myself get walked over a little bit because I empathize with people. I understand their situation. Then I might go, yeah, actually, that guy's got a good point. But sometimes, I need to go, no, hang on. You're messing me about here. And rather than use that anger to explode or explode, I've managed to channel that in such a way where I can have those conversations in an empathetic way and channel that anger. So I guess my question to you is, I've developed that technique myself. Is that a technique that we can all learn to channel anger for good?
Well, look, let me be clear about this. I fully support people being angry. I have a concern when they act their anger out. So thematically, I say be as angry as you want to be, but you can also be kind. You see, what will happen is when somebody's anger gets triggered, they demonize the other person. Their ability to be empathetic and compassionate just goes out the window. And it's irrelevant whether it's a kid, teenager, young adult. That's what we do. We just switch to the dark side. So part of my mantra is be as angry as you want to be, but you can be kind. Now, what that look like? What that looks like is me being able to say to you, Mark, I'm angry with you. No screaming, no shouting, no hurling abuse. I'm simply angry with you. That's how I feel right now. And the reason I'm angry with you is because I need you to value me, respect me, appreciate me. And I know that there are times I don't value, respect, or appreciate you, but that's what I need from you right now. I'm going to get a much better response, because the alternative to that, as you probably know, we start the conversation with you always, you never, why don't you, what's wrong with you, that's bad, you should behave like that. Game over. The person will become defensive, and attack, or the person will become defensive and go straight to shame and withdraw. So I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, it's it's based on my journey, and I know it works. So I just wanted to kind of confirm that with you about that's a brilliant technique. Rather than blaming that other person for causing you issues, you can own your emotion and tell that person why you feel like that, and they might be able to come back to you why that situation happened in the first place. I just want to pick up just before the end there with Matt's question. What are the options if I can't afford group sessions? Is reading effective without the personal connection? So we've talked about a couple of books here tonight. Is that something that we can go on the journey ourselves?
Listen, this is what I'd like to say. I would like to support your charity. So if anybody books for our programs, the first thing we'll do is we'll give a 10% discount.
Yeah.
And so it'll take you $4.95 minus whatever it is, and that money will go directly to the charity. The only problem that we have is that we've got 3 spaces left. And if they want to book for future spaces, what we can do is we can give them a code on the basis that, you know, they participate in your webinars and your these programs that you offer. But coming back to the question that's being asked, what I would suggest is there's so much literature out in there. My book, Beating Anger, was sold well over 85,000 copies. It's on the top. It's one of the top 15 personal development books, according to the Sunday Times magazine. It's a fantastic book. Most people who read are absolutely blown away by it. And of course, that is our calling card. We get a lot of people who read the book, feel inspired, and come on our programs. But the great thing about the book, it's got a lot of exercises. So it's not just about reading, it's about applying what you learn while reading the book.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for your offer, because I know there's dads in our group that could really benefit from the additional help. But guys, you know, we've brought up some books and I'm sure there's some stuff in the comments, some links that you can get in there tonight. And, you know, thank you everyone for being part of the show. Thank you everyone for watching. Please, just one last time, hit that share button. If you're still out there, let people know you're here. Now, next week, next Monday, we're doing a special Black Lives Matter show, and we're going to be talking to Kenneth from Fathers Incorporated over in the USA, who we're teaming up with to talk about the issues and how to deal with this with our children. So thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for being part of the show. You've been amazing. The audience has been amazing. Chris has been amazing. And I've been Mark Cropley. Thanks for watching.